All right, everyone, we are moving into shape. So we're going to do this real slow. I want us to not only learn more about shape, but be able to incorporate it into our drawings. So I showed you a few drawings at the last workshop, and since then I've made these two drawings. This is charcoal and this charcoal pencil, or rather this China marker, which is more of a waxy. It's not. It doesn't move as much. It's more like a crayon almost, and it doesn't move too much, and it's harder to erase than the charcoal. So I use it for when I want something to sort of stick and not move on the drawing. So here's one drawing. You can see some of the elements. One suggestion that I want you to try out in your drawings is to reverse the values. So you can see this is one drawing, and then I have another drawing here that I've done. You can see where there's black, I've now interchanged it for white. Same where there's white, I've interchanged it for black. So that's another way that you can progress or alter your drawings. Now, I want us to start talking about shape. There really are some primary shapes. The first one I want to talk about is a circle. So on your piece of paper, you just start, again, very lightly, just ever so delicately, with a circle shape. And with your tools, instead of just going around just once, I'd like you to really develop this circle. Sort of move around. You could use your finger as we do. And not only a circle that is flat, but a circle that's three-dimensional. So as if you could go around, imagine that you could go around and touch the front side of that circle and around on the back side of that circle. So we're creating more of a sphere. And then what I want you to get into the motion of is things that are closer to us tend to be bolder, thicker, and things that are further away tend to be thinner, smaller, and lighter. So I want you to employ that as you move through this circle. Moving back, it's light. Coming forward, it's darker. Moving back, it's light. Coming forward, it's darker. And so that you're building almost as if we have a piece of string that we are wrapping around this sphere, building it up. And I'm not looking at anything, I'm just developing this from my mind's eye. So I'm building this sphere, and it can go not only horizontally but vertically. You can imagine this thing is going around, moving forward, moving back. Same on the other side. So tactile, that tactile sense, like we're actually touching the outside of this sphere. Once you get a nice good amount, you can take your fingers and sort of smush and move. Again, try to imagine like that you are touching and moving this stuff around a physical sphere. You can see that sort of just darkened it all. So what I'm going to do is now pretend that there's a light. And on this circle or sphere, I'm going to pretend that there's a light coming from here. So there's a light sort of shining down here. And what does that mean? What does that look like? So in this edge, I'm going to take my now eraser, and again, I'm still kind of moving it as if it's touching this sphere. Moving this around. So I have that sense of light coming down. And I'm going to use the cross-hatching, but use it in the reverse manner with the eraser rather than drawing. You can see I'm using the eraser to create those lines, those cross-hatching lines. Feeling like as if I can move all the way around this sphere. And then there are some rules about light. We just talked about this light. So one of the rules is that where there is light, the space would be darker. Where the object is being touched with light, the space would be darker. So I'm just going to go around the edge here. And create a little bit of dark space. Behind that sphere. Just going to blend it into the space. Go back in with my eraser and just make sure that that light where it's hitting is nice and light. And then the other thing about light is that it has the highlight, it has the sort of shadowed light, and then it has the darkness, or the hidden from the light. And if you can think about this light comes down, it's going to come down, it hits this object, it comes over here, and it usually hits something over here and bounces off and hits the object. Okay, so light, the source of light, it will come down, hit the object. It will also move past the object, hit and bounce off of something and hit the object. So there's this thing called a reflected light that usually happens in objects. So I'm going to give this object a little bit of a reflected light, our sphere here. And maybe if you'd like, it has a shadow. And there's just in the way on the object has a highlight, sort of a middle ground, and the darkest value, so does your shadow. Your shadow is going to have a reflected light, a dark light, and a lightest value. So I'm just going to go in here and color it one color, and then I'll manipulate it. Color it with one value. See if that's the right shape for this sphere. And then I'm going to go in with my eraser. So right where that reflected light is, that's what's happening on the object. There'll probably be a reflected light from the object hitting into the shadow. You can see that there, and you might go back with your darker tool and just create that nice crisp clarity between the object and the shadow. And just in the same way as there's darkness behind the object on the light side, there's light behind the object on the dark side. So you want to kind of emphasize that in your object, just to give it a little bit more emphasis and reality. All right, so we've got this darker part of the shadow. got a little bit of light, and then usually the outer ring of the shadow is lighter. So it's going from darkness into the light. All right, there we go. And then if there's any nuances, you guys probably know by now that this charcoal stuff just gets everywhere, but it does get us feeling the material a little bit more. All right, so there we go. We have our sphere, our circle turned into a three-dimensional object, being tactile. You can always go back very lightly and give it that sense that it turns just by lightly adding some of these lines. And just lightly adding those just to give the sense that this object turns and is three-dimensional. It moves through the space. Now, when we talk about contour, maybe you've heard this before, contour usually refers to this outer edge of an object. Cross contour is when these lines move across the object. Okay, so as if you're feeling like you can touch the all around this shape. All right. So once you get your sphere and you feel like it is feeling pretty three-dimensional and you're working with this circular element, I want you to go back to your drawings and see if this sense of volume or roundedness, see if you can employ that into your pieces. And it really has to do with the tactility, the way that your marks are moving in this light and shadow. So I'm going to use this as a reference, and I'm going to start going into my drawing. Okay, so I have my sphere and my drawing, and I'm employing some of this roundedness and space and volume into my drawing. How can I do that? Well, let's start with this element here. All right, so that is a sort of curved shape, and I have these leaf-like shapes. So I think how I can employ in my drawing I'm going to give each one of these guys a little bit more volume. So I'm going to give them that darkness. And where the light is, I'm going to make it light. And then again, we have to be sort of careful here. This can be dark, this can have a darkness here, but it has to be lighter than the element to create that sense of volume. So I'm going to give that a little bit of darkness. Again, leave this part lighter. I can always go back in with the eraser to nuance it even more. So you can see here, I'm not just drawing the outline of these shapes anymore. There's more of a sense of space and light and shadow. erase this. And it doesn't have to be realistic, just more, stay in our abstract land if you'd like, but just more a sense of light and shadow, space, depth, overlapping. All right, so I've now changed this element that was seemingly flat in the drawing. Now has more volume, more space, and not everything needs to be treated that way. Let's see over here. Still use and employ the methods that I've been teaching you, sort of taking the charcoal and filling a space, maybe rubbing that space to create that charcoal ground. Go in with your eraser in some instances. All right, so I have this light happening here. I kind of like this mysterious light that's coming from that branch there. And then in my drawing, I have these sort of swoopy, kind of scribbly marks happening. I think I'll employ those in this area. There's no wrong way. Just starting to use all these different things that we've been talking about. Let's see, I got those swirly things over there. And then I have this sort of seaweedy thing here. Let's see if I can employ some of these methods of space and light. So this guy kind of comes up, and I'm not trying to recreate it specifically or most perfectly. I'm just really allowing myself to create another drawing based on this first drawing, or now second or third drawing. There we go. So I'm going to just add a little bit of this charcoal everywhere. Give it some of that grounding, that charcoal ground. And just like we said in this piece, we have a source of light. How does that react in the piece? You can play with it and have different sources of light, but try first creating one sense of light. So if this is lit up and that's the shadow, then the light I can pretend is coming from this direction. So then I'm going to treat this object as though the light is coming from that direction. Going to lighten up some of these areas as if the light is coming down on it. And again, don't forget about the spaces. So if it's a light area, then the background behind the light would be darker, and making sure that you give some shadow or dark areas on the object. There's no right or wrong way, as I have said. Just have fun with it. You could even play with the stippling or cross hatching to create these darker and lighter areas. Go back in with your eraser to really pull out the lights. I think over here, because of this thing's in the way, it would be maybe all in darkness. So I'm just going to darken this corner up. Maybe some just bits of light poking in. All right. The other thing you can do is the space. The space can be treated in a sphere like all right, so that's pretty good. The light's coming from this way. It feels like the light is sort of coming that way. And maybe I'm going to, now there's this background space here. I think maybe I'll try to incorporate maybe a sense of a sphere-like shape in the space. So the darker edge. And you can see I'm overlapping, just going right over things. That's okay, that's acceptable. And then maybe even, now that I've overlapped it, I've lost some of the detail of that object, so maybe I'll go back in now and draw that again through the darkness. Just to add a little nuance. It's kind of fun as it shifts from dark to light in there. So then this sphere maybe gets over to here. Maybe it would come over around here. And I want that to be the sense of light still coming from that direction. So I'm going to now color in that background, because remember where the light is, behind it there would be darkness. All right, so now we have taken these seemingly flatter spaces or drawings. Not that there's anything wrong with them. There's a sense of depth because of the overlapping and the relationship of light to dark, but now incorporated a little bit more sense of space and light. Again, there's no wrong way. Very light over here. That looks nice. There. And then maybe there's a little bit of a reflected light over here. All right. Hopefully you can employ this to your next drawing. See you soon.